All right, we're actually going to start John 21 as the first passage that I want to look at. We have, I wrote down the names of, and I think that I have the right order. It doesn't really matter if it's right or not. We looked at Andrew, then we looked at Peter, then we looked at James, then we looked at John. Last week we looked at Philip. That sounds familiar? That's 5 of the 12. So today is the 6th that we will look at, and we're getting I don't know what you say, the material that we have left to study these disciples is getting limited, with the exception of Judas. We know a lot about him. Nathaniel is the one we're going to look at today. And I have here the first thing on your notes. It says, not from Bethsaida. Oh, actually, let's read it, and you'll know. But why did I say not from Bethsaida? All 5 of the other ones that we looked at were from Bethsaida. So finally, we have a little variety in our apostles. John, it's just one verse. There were together Simon Peter and Thomas, called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other of his disciples. We don't know who the other 2 disciples were, but all these other ones, well, actually even Thomas, we don't know that Thomas was a fisherman, but they were all out there. This is the instance when, after the resurrection, and they're out fishing, and then Jesus speaks to them from shore and asked them if they had caught any fish. We only look at that story. But here is Nathanael mentioned on the ship with, is there 6 of them? Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others, 7 of them. 7 of them on the ship, and Nathanael is one of them. We don't know, again, a whole lot about him. This is the only place it's said that he's from Cana. I don't know why it's pointed out. If it hadn't been pointed out there, we would not know. I guess we would just assume he was from Bethsaida. What is Cana? Why is it significant? Anybody? How Cana figures into his life or the life of the disciples? I looked it up in the atlas, is that what it's called, the atlas, where you see all the map and all the characters where they are? And there is no certainty of where Cana of Galilee was. There's 2 different archaeological sites that are possibilities. The one that is in my Bible, in the maps in my Bible, I don't say it's in the Bible, it's not inspired. I don't know who drew the maps. Shows the one that I think is like the most historically favored position, which is like 10 miles to the northwest of, northwest of, I can't remember I'm going to look at the map to remember what the city is. It's well known, not Jerusalem. Yeah, Nazareth. There you go. I should have known that. So 10 miles to the northwest of Nazareth, and that theory. There's like an area on top of a hill has never been excavated, but it was Josephus that described it. That's where it was. So that's why throughout however many years, people thought that's where it was. But there's another site which is like 10 miles to the northeast of Nazareth, and it has been excavated. That nothing has said it was Cana of Galilee, but based on like the landscape and what's done there's an actual city there now. They're coming to think it would probably is more likely that was Cana of Galilee. The main reason being, whenever Jesus visits Cana of Galilee, they're passing through on their way to Capernaum. And you wouldn't go northwest to go from Nazareth to Capernaum, which is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. You'd go east, north and east. So it really doesn't matter where it was, but we will see that from the first 4 chapters of John, that Jesus passes through Cana. Not just then, other times passes through Cana when he's leaving Jerusalem or leaving Nazareth to go to Capernaum or Bethsaida, that area where the other disciples were from. So what happened in Cana? John chapter 2. Anybody remember? Yeah, the wedding. Very good. John 2:1, and the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee. So this is right after we have like the introduction of the first set of disciples, the first 6, I guess. Then in chapter 2, it says the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. So Jesus and all the disciples are invited. We know this miracle is well known. Jesus turns the water into wine, which, does it say this was the first miracle? It doesn't say that here. Well, I've looked at, it seems like it did say it somewhere. Verse 11. This beginning of miracles. So yeah, I guess we can assume it means it was the first, but it's where his public ministry kind of was initiated. Now, from there, I don't know that we know where chapter 1 took place, but the disciples go to Cana. He changes the water into wine, and it's like this is the start of his ministry. And then verse 13 says, and the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. All right, so here's on his way. Cana was probably on the way to Jerusalem. So from wherever they were, they went to Cana. Then they go to Jerusalem. Chapter 3, you know what happens in Jerusalem is he meets with Nicodemus and the other Pharisees and does teaching there. He's not accepted necessarily there in, let's see, it doesn't say why, maybe. Oh, chapter 4, verse 1. When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, verse 3, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee and had to go through Samaria. All right, so he came from Galilee, Cana of Galilee, came into Jerusalem, met with Nicodemus, presumably did other things, maybe even miraculous things that aren't listed here. And then he realizes what it says in verse 1, that the Pharisees are kind of, this is when they're really annoyed with him and realizing he's a threat to them. And so he decides he needs to leave because it's not his time to be, that far along in his persecution and is close to his, ultimate sacrifice. So he leaves and he goes north. On his way to Galilee, he goes through Samaria. And what happens to him in Samaria? He meets with the woman by the well. Very good. And so that's another famous story. He makes it through there. And then we have the end of chapter 4. Look at verse 46. So Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. What if you stop right there, does anyone find that peculiar? Anything about that verse peculiar? Jesus has done one miracle, changed water into wine. And the leader from Capernaum comes down to meet Jesus in Cana, all right? And he says to him, he came down asking for Jesus to heal his son. We don't have any indication that Jesus has healed anybody up to this point. But this nobleman knew about Jesus, heard that he was leaving Judea to come back to Galilee, probably to Capernaum area, and Jesus would be there because that's where he was from and that's where he spent a lot of time. But the nobleman hurries to meet him before he doesn't even give him time to get there. And he meets him in Cana because he knows Jesus is the only source of help that his son could have. And he didn't have time to wait for him to get to Capernaum. do you think? I think it's weird because, again, like I looked at the list of the miracles, I'm like, that Jesus, because they're not correct order all the time in the other gospels and where they fall in John. So maybe there were other miracles that Jesus performed after the marriage at Cana and this one. But all the lists I found said this is the second miracle, the second public miracle. So it looks, either this guy he just had super faith in who Jesus was with just one miracle, or there were a lot of other miracles that he was basing this on, or maybe being from Jesus' hometown, maybe he had observed a lot of other stuff or heard from others up there about what Jesus could do.
I would just, on verse number 54, it says it's the second miracle that Jesus did, but was it the second one in Cana?
Yeah, exactly. I had that in my notes too. It's it's hard the way it's worded, and I mean maybe you have to understand Greek to know exactly, is it the second in Cana? He did two in Cana. This was the second one, or was it his second overall, or was it his second public one? Maybe he did some private one. It's just hard to say, but clearly the point of the story is that the nobleman was confident that Jesus was the solution, was the only thing that would help his son. And let's finish that story. So I assumed that you knew it, but let's read it. So his son was at the point of death. Jesus said unto him, and this again is, look at what Jesus says, except ye see signs and wonders, you will not believe. All right, that makes me think he had heard all this great stuff that Jesus was doing, that, more than just the wedding, changing the water into the wine. There were other signs and wonders that Jesus says, oh, you heard about these other things, and this is what you've come to see. So he's kind of questioning the nobleman's faith. Like, he's questioning why you came down here. You just wanted to see a miracle. And this is not the only time that Jesus kind of accuses the crowd of being that way. The nobleman defends himself, verse 49. The nobleman said unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. So yeah, this is why. He has great love for his son, and he doesn't want him to die. Jesus said unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. So, where was this miracle then performed?
Either Cana or Capernaum.
Yeah, or both. But Jesus is here in Cana. The nobleman's son is up there, I don't know how many miles away, 30 miles or something. And he came to meet Jesus in Cana. He left his son who was sick. And his son actually, he doesn't actually die. But he does, well, because sometimes people die and then but I think that happened another time where it says, no, it's too late. Somebody came and told a message when someone else had the same situation where they came to Jesus, and then other messengers came and said, oh, it's not matter, he's dead, don't worry about it. But this isn't the case. The son was just sick, and this one. And Jesus says, go, he's fine, don't worry about it. And no one believes him and just heads home. Right? And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, thy son liveth. And he's like, well, yeah, Jesus said he was. Yeah. Then inquired he of them the hour when he began to amend. And they said unto him, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in the which Jesus said unto him, thy son liveth, and himself believed in his whole house. So yeah, the nobleman considers, reflects on it, and that's why he asked him, when did he get better? And it says about the 7th hour. And I pictured the kid sick laying there sick on his deathbed, basically. And then, why are you all mourning? And I'm fine. It's just like that. And the nobleman looks back and thinks, and is like, the 7th hour, that sounds familiar. Yeah, that was the exact moment that Jesus said he was healed. He was healed. And those are the words that Jesus spoke. Thy son liveth, was at the 7th hour. This again is the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. These are the only places that Cana is mentioned, 3 times. The marriage, the miracle at the marriage, the miracle of the nobleman's son, and to tell us that that's where Nathanael is from. So miracle 1, changing water to wine. Miracle 2 was the healing of the nobleman's son. And it is important to point out what Jesus said to him. Except ye see signs and wonders. Does it say you will not believe? Let's read that again. Yeah. Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe. Why is that so important? Remember we talked about Philip last week. And Philip needed to see things. Philip needed proof. And so we'll see. Actually, let's just go back there. John 1. John 1, we'll focus on this a little bit later, but we did look at it last week, we'll look at it again. Philip finds Nathanael, verse 45, it says to him, we have found him, of whom Moses and the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, can there any good thing come up out of Nazareth? Philip saith unto him, come and see. All right, so when Jesus told an nobleman, except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe, that's what Jesus was here for. He was to give the signs and wonders. That was the point. So I don't know that he's questioning the nobleman, maybe more likely putting the emphasis on what he does, on his miracles, so that they know, yeah, you will believe, and it's the signs and wonders that are going to prove that that Jesus is worthy. And I have here in the next part of the notes, is only named by John. That is, John is the only one who mentions a Nathanael of all the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke, well, I'm going to say that. We know there was 12 disciples. There's always 12 of them listed, because there are some people say Nathanael was a 13th. Yeah, there's 12. One of them John does not mention. All right. One of them everybody mentions except for John, who doesn't mention him. So it would be logical to say that's the same person by a different name. All right. Does anyone know what the other gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, call Nathanael? Some people say it's his surname, because Bar means son of, right? So Bar, oh, I didn't tell you his name. Starts with Bar. Matthew 10, did anyone look those up? You know. Bartokamos? Not Bartimaeus, no. No, Bar-Jonah was Peter's last name or surname. There you go. Matthew 10 verse 3. And it's listed the same everywhere else, so we just need to read it here. Bartholomew, verse 3. Philip and Bartholomew. Yeah. Bartholomew is the one that is not mentioned by John. All right? But you can read this list. Matthew does not include Nathanael. You could read Mark 3. Mark does not include Nathanael, but he does include Bartholomew. Luke, he gives his list twice. He gives it in Luke 6 and he gives it in Acts 1. He does not mention Nathanael, but he does mention Bartholomew. All right, so we don't know why John, was he wrong? Did he just get this name wrong when he was thinking back? Did he? Oh, I forgot someone had to remind him his name was actually Bartholomew. I don't know. It's hard to say. It could be that maybe Jesus said, no, I'm going to call him Nathanael, because Bartholomew is kind of not a nickname, but it could, more than likely, it's just referring to his ancestry. So whether his dad was named this or he was from a family that was, I don't know if it says here. I didn't write it in my notes. It means son of Talmai, Talmai. All right, so there are a couple places in the Old Testament where Talmai is mentioned, and the family of Absalom, actually, there was Talmais or something. So maybe he was a descendant of Absalom, which would make him a descendant of David as well. We don't know that. But yeah, Jesus maybe changed his name, or maybe John's the only one who knew it, or maybe John knew him better and called him by his first name. Everybody's called him Mr. Bartholomew, maybe it's something like that. But anyways, it doesn't matter. We're going to call him Nathanael because the other gospel writers, they don't tell us anything about him other than give us his name. John at least tells us, and he tells us quite a bit about him in John 1. And this is the only place he's mentioned. John 21 on the ship with fishing, okay, with the other disciples, with the 7 of them. And here in chapter 1, when Jesus selects him or finds him, and his interaction with Jesus actually gives us without trying to even read too much into it, it tells us a lot about him and who he was by what he says to Jesus, what he says to Philip, and what Jesus says back to. Actually, you can depend on the things Jesus says about you or to you, his response to you, to tell us, to help us understand where you're coming from, right? And that's kind of the case with Nathaniel. He has 2 questions, and he has kind of a confession, and those tell us about him. But Jesus' response to him also tells us a lot about him. All right, so following along the notes, Bartholomew is his other name. The name Nathaniel means given by God, or God given, or God gives, which is a popular name today, it seems like. I went to school with Nathaniels, related to Nathaniels. Bartholomew, not so much. Yeah. And then here, this is kind of just a note. Actually, a lot of this is just notes, maybe not useful, except for one thing. It says, with the Apostle Philip, where he's first mentioned here, let's look at it. Verse 44. Now Philip was of Bethsaida, the city of Andrew, and Peter. Philip findeth Nathanael. All right? So he's mentioned with Philip. Some people say a lot of the disciples were brothers with each other. Maybe Philip and Nathaniel Bartholomew were brothers. That's possible. We already looked at Matthew 2. Go back to Matthew 10. Matthew 10. And I like the way that it's phrased. I don't want to put too much focus on punctuation. I don't know. He did Hebrews or did Greek? Do Greeks have punctuation? Anyone here experts? Not like we do. Be thinking about stuff, phonetic punctuations, but look at how it's phrased here, and I'll ask you what you think about this. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first Simon, who is called Peter, comma, and Andrew his brother. Is that a comma? That's a semicolon. James the son of Zebedee, comma, and John his brother, semicolon. Philip, comma, and Bartholomew, semicolon. Thomas, comma, and Matthew, the publican, semicolon. James the son of Alphaeus, comma, and Labius, whose surname was Thaddeus, semicolon. Simon the Canaanite and Judas Iscariot, comma, who also betrayed him. All right, so 12 of them are mentioned. There's commas between every other one and semicolons between every second one. And it's kind of the same as it is in the other Gospels. It isn't exactly the same way. But why do you think that is? Why are they mentioned in pairs? Some of them were brothers. Maybe that's why. Is there any other reason you could think they might be mentioned in pairs? Go to Mark 6. I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying it's a possibility. Mark 6 and verse 7. And he called unto him the 12 and began to send them forth 2 by 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits. 2 by 2? He sent them in pairs, right? The 12 of them. And it does say somewhere else there was 70, but not here. But he's talking about the 12 were sent in groups of 2. So could that be why Philip and Bartholomew or Philip and Nathaniel are mentioned as a pair? It could be. If that's the case, I feel bad for whoever to go out with Judas. Simon the Canaanite, the zealot. Okay. Oh, that's just a side note. So he's mentioned, or you could say mentioned with or paired with the Apostle Philip. And it could be that Jesus is like, well, you know him, because Philip went to find Nathaniel, so it made sense to put them together. Maybe they knew each other. They were friends from before. Maybe they understood each other. They worked good as a team. I don't know if that's reading too much into it, but Jesus knew what he was doing. And here we get to learn now. We're going to go into the character of Nathaniel, which you might not think, well, there's not much there. He's just introduced to us, basically. Back to John 1. Start at verse 45. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him. So just what Philip says to Nathanael, tells us Nathanael already has an understanding, right? This is not new information. We have found him of whom Moses and the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. All right, so I don't know if the prophets wrote Jesus of Nazareth. Well, actually, did the prophets write Jesus of Nazareth anywhere? What does Nazareth mean? Anybody know? Okay, I'm not going to say that it means this. The word sounds similar, and it's kind of a play on word. It means branch. Has anyone heard that before? Branch. Was Jesus called the branch? Yeah. Many play, and we'll look at them a little bit later, some places where he's called the branch. Kind of a play on words. So I don't know that that's what Philip says when he says Jesus of Nazareth. This is a different word. We're talking about Hebrew word compared to a Greek word. Okay. I didn't write it down so I don't know what the word actually sounds like. But he says, we have found him of whom, so he's talking about, we have found the one that the prophets speak of. He didn't have to explain to Nathanael who the prophets were speaking of and what this Messiah was and what the intent was and where he's coming from and what's going to happen. He assumes Nathanael is already caught up with him in these things. So Nathanael had knowledge of the law, all right, or the Old Testament. Is that a stretch? I think it's the case for all of them, the disciples that Jesus chose. They seemed to be knowledgeable in the scriptures, specifically in the law. And his response tells us that as well. Look at verse 46. Nathanael said to him, can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? What do you think about that statement? Anybody?
Well, he's probably been there.
It probably wasn't a really big city.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if from what I've read, it doesn't say anything about it being a good city. It was a very small city, an insignificant city. I think of Hollister before the highway. Well, actually, the highway used to go through Hollister, but nobody ever went to Hollister unless you were a truck driver or something, right? It was out of the way. And that's kind of the case for Nazareth. And it was overshadowed. I don't remember the name of the city, like 15 miles away, was a much bigger, like, I don't want to say metropolis, but the city where all the merchants, where it was on the main route. Nazareth was out of the way. So some people believe there was only like 150 residents. It was tiny. All right. So when he says, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Yeah, there was kind of a prejudice, not just towards Nazareth, but to the Galileans in general, but specifically Nazareth. Is he showing some kind of bias or prejudice when he says this? Right? How do you feel? I'm not saying whether you're right or wrong. I'm just like, what do you think about it? It sounds like it's a prejudice to me, which I wouldn't put it past the Jews. Because in order to get to Nazareth, what did you have to go through? Samaria. And how they feel about the Samaritans. Same kind of thing. They had their certain people they didn't want to have anything to do with. And that wasn't the case. The people of Nazareth were Jews. They were Israelites. They weren't Samaritans, but they were looked down on a little bit. But also when he says, can there anything good thing come out of Nazareth, he's saying, because what did Philip had said to him? It is Jesus of Nazareth, the one that we found. And when Nathanael says, that's not the right place. What does if he knows the law, where does the Messiah come from? Yeah, if he knows Micah, he comes from Bethlehem, not from Nazareth. All right? Although Jesus is called the branch many times in the Old Testament. So if you have that play on words, okay, it kind of works. But that's not what he's talking about. He's saying, no, he knows, but Bethlehem is the place. Maybe he doesn't know Jesus was born in Bethlehem. I don't know, maybe that was not common knowledge like it is today. They didn't have the Gospels. Maybe Jesus explained it to him eventually. So he does match that prophecy. He was from Bethlehem. but he also was from Nazareth. Jesus, verse 47. Oh, did I skip saying? So apparent knowledge of the law, and then skepticism. That's when he says, can anything come out of Nazareth? It's good to question, isn't it? He knows what the law says. He knows what the scripture says. And here's a person claiming to be fulfilling prophecy or saying what God wants. Can we be skeptical of that? Yeah, I know. He better have something, an explanation to be contradicting scripture. And that's kind of the conflict that Nathanael had, his skepticism. Jesus saw Nathanael, verse 47. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Can anyone have a definition of guile? Okay, dishonest, lying. That's good. I wrote it down somewhere that I looked it up this morning, and it gave me a definition. And I don't know where I wrote it, so... tricking is the word. Deception. Tricking, like wiles. Nathanael was not from Bethsaida. All the people that were from Bethsaida, what were they? Well, other than Philip. Fishermen. What does a fisherman do? Does he beguile? Does he use trickery and deception? Well, our fishermen today do. I don't know about the fishermen back then do. But I see Jesus, he does this. I don't know if he's intentionally doing it, but he's intentionally like, in you, you're not a fisherman. That's what it looks like he's saying to me. When Jesus said to Peter and Andrew and all them, I will make you fishers of men. They understood fishing. They understood how to be deceptive. And no, I don't say to trick the people. That's not what he's saying. To be a fisherman in the sense, bring them in and hunt them down. Why does that sound so bad? But when he says this to Nathanael, I'm like, he's got a lot more learning to do on how to, be a witness. That's kind of what he's saying to me. But yeah, it does mean that that there's no dishonesty in him. He's an upstanding. He's of good character. It definitely means all of that. But I also get the picture that whether he's saying you've got a lot to learn, or he's saying maybe it has something to do with, his what was the word we used? Prejudice towards that culture, where it doesn't seem like, I know that Nazareth was not where the fishermen lived, but he already has a prejudice towards people who are inferior to him. And so Jesus is saying, you're definitely not one of them, when he says you're of no guile. I don't know. That I think that is reading into it, but I think it's fun to parallel that with the fishing aspect. So he's no bitterness. It could also mean he's just a straightforward person. Jesus expects him to tell the truth and to give an honest response when Jesus asks questions. And that's what he does. Can anything good come out of... actually, I have... Let's go to Jeremiah 23. Yeah, that's right. Jeremiah 23. I know we're going way back to the Old Testament to study Nathanael. Bartholomew, no less. Jeremiah 23:5 says, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in those days. Isaiah 11, I don't want to, we're going to skip Isaiah because we don't have time. Go to Zechariah. I have two verses to look at in Zechariah. Therefore, verse 8, chapter 3, verse 8. Okay, that's Zephaniah. That's not going to do it. Hear now, O Joshua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wandered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. All right. The other verse in Isaiah, and there's a couple other places where Jesus is referred to as the branch, specifically the branch of David. So he's a descendant of David. But Zechariah says it different here. I think I'm just going to go ahead and skip. I'm going to just give you the answers because there's some other important things I want to get to. He was honest without guile or deception. Not without guile or deception. Trusted in the Messiah, not in the law. And that's what he says to Jesus. Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. So he's the one. While the other Jews trusted in the law for salvation, like they totally, the law was the most important. It had become the most important thing to them, to the point that that is what they needed for salvation. He did not, and I think the other disciples were the same way. There was probably a sect of Hebrews that continue to be faithful to the truth, to the Messiah, the promise of the Messiah, and faith and honoring God, and they didn't fall into the Pharisaical trap and the religious trap. And that's why I think the Jesus and the other disciples were not from Jerusalem area, because that's where that was like the heart. We talked about whatever city it was in Asia Minor, the heart of Satan. It's like Jerusalem was the heart of religion. So the farther you went away from that heart, their influence was weaker. That's why I feel about being so far away in Galilee. Although he was rejected in Galilee, so for the most part. John 1, 46, 48. I don't know what I didn't write it down. I would say honest confession, maybe. 46 and 48. But what I wanted to get down to is, it was verse 48. Before that, Nathanael said unto him, whence knowest thou me? So his first question is, can anything good come out of Galilee? His second question is, in verse 48, whence knowest thou me? It could be, how do you know me? Or where, he could be asking for a sign, where do you know me from? Like, give me a sign, is what he's saying. I read it as like, I've never talked to you before. How do you know anything about me? But Jesus clearly knows him. He says to him, before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. All right, if you still have Zechariah, go to Zechariah chapter 3 and verse 10. Actually, let's read... No, just verse 10. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall you call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. Branch, Nazareth. He's had a question about Nazareth. He seems to be focused on prophecy, Nathanael. And here Jesus specifically uses wording from prophecy. And this isn't the only place. Micah, we're not going to look it up. Micah 3:4. Go to 1 Kings 4. But in Micah 3:4, the same phrase, under the vine and under the fig tree. And in those, it's describing what it will be like when God's people are living under the blessing. All right? So living under a fig tree, I mean, you look at our fig tree, if we trimmed it up a little higher, it would be a pleasant place to sit in the summer, would it not? So that's what it means. That's what they saw it as, was a peaceful. All I can think is the Spanish word. I can't even think of that word. It means relief or hot. Yeah, or where you go away for peace. You go to a place of, Cecilia. What is this? It's the beach in Pacific Grove, and where we go to see the tide pools and all that. What is the word? Nobody can. Is it just one of those days? Asilomar. What is that? It means a beach of Asilo. It wasn't you. Joaquin told me. Yeah, haven. That's what it is. That's what Joaquin said. Is that okay?
Different parts of Mexico.
Oh, that's it. You're not from Pacific Grove? And I asked him what that means, and it says asilo has something to do with, it's like related to another word that means haven or shelter. So that was a beach, a peaceful beach that they came to sit at. So that's what I'm saying, under the fig tree. And I couldn't think of either of those words, but thank you. What did I say, 1 Kings 4? Yeah, 21. And Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river unto the land of the Philistines, unto the border of Egypt, and brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. Look at verse 25. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. So when Jesus says to Nathanael, I saw you under the fig tree, I know learning this story when I was a kid. They had a flannel graph, and it shows Nathanael literally under a fig tree, which very much could be the case. But I see when Jesus tells him, I saw you under the fig tree, he's probably speaking to something that only Nathanael knows. Maybe Nathanael was thinking about peace, or maybe while he was physically under the fig tree, maybe he was praying for a sign or something. But Jesus is talking to him and using the language that speaks that Nathanael can understand. So it wasn't just that Jesus is supernaturally placing him as yesterday I saw you in the, we don't know. Was it a week ago? Was it just before Philip found him? Nobody knows when he was under a fig tree. So I don't think Jesus is saying, I saw you, or maybe your house is under a fig tree. I mean, yeah, visualize it that way if you want. But Jesus is able to connect with his heart somehow, probably through prayer. So I think Nathanael was probably meditating or focusing his energies, probably looking for a sign, waiting for the Messiah. When is it going to happen? And when Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree, he's referring to what was going on in Nathanael's heart. Did I say Philip? I feel like it's confusing, but he's talking about Nathanael, okay, or Bartholomew. Maybe I should say Bartholomew because I'm not going to mess that one up. So yeah, probably looking for a sign. Maybe he was being thoughtful, or it was something he was meditating on, and Jesus brings it up. Maybe he was studying the Old Testament. Maybe like the Ethiopian, he just happened to be reading there, and God sent somebody based on what he was reading. All right, the other Philip, coincidentally, and then Nathanael focusing on, meditating on, contemplating on the prophecies, on what his position in that plan is, and Jesus knew exactly what he needed, and Jesus speaks to that. That's what it looks like now. Well, okay, what is his confession then? There. Confession. I says a confession of acceptance. We're having a rabbi, all right, which is also, you go John chapter 1, look at the previous verses. Somebody else called him rabbi. And I mean, rabbi means master or teacher. But when they're saying rabbi, look at verse 38. Jesus turned and saw them falling and said unto them, what seek ye? They said unto him, rabbi, which is to say, being interpreted, master. I think this is their recognition that he is my rabbi. All right? I'm listening to what he has to say. You're not a generic rabbi. Okay? Nathanael says the same thing. Rabbi, thou art the Son of God. Thou art the King of Israel. So he is the master, the teacher. He is my teacher. He is the Son of God. Plenty of verses, quite a few verses in the Bible talk about Jesus being the Son of God, from what he's called and what he calls himself as well. And then the King of Israel. And this is where it gets kind of tricky when he says King of Israel, because it seems like the disciples, a lot of them, were looking for a earthly leader of the Israelites. So it's a little questionable when he says, you are the King of Israel. He also says the Son of God. So he probably acknowledges that he is the Son of God, that he is God himself, that he is the Messiah, but he's misunderstanding what that Messiah is for. So they're looking for a physical leader to deliver them from the Romans. And he wasn't alone in that sentiment. Okay. But I don't think he's looking at Jesus as just that deliverer. He's looking at Jesus is the Messiah that is promised, but he's expecting that Messiah, to deliver from sin and all that. But he's also expecting deliverance from the Romans. All right. If Jesus is bringing deliverance from the Romans, why is he picking a bunch of fishermen? Well, the disciples were dense that way. But Jesus I won't spend a whole lot of time. I mention this like every time we talk about the disciples. The ones he picks are the ones who seem not the correct choices to me in human terms. Okay, when Nathaniel, kind of on the same lines, when he says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" he sees the same kind of bias. He's like, God wouldn't pick somebody out of Nazareth. That person isn't. He's going to pick someone who's been trained in law and trained in military, and Nazareth is a town full of nobodies. He wouldn't pick that guy. Well, that was the one. It was Jesus, seeming to be, all right, without you knowing he was God, he seems to be unqualified. All of the disciples, they seemed unqualified as well. We don't know much about Nathaniel, but I think it's safe to say he probably wasn't qualified to be a disciple, in the same sense that none of the disciples were, in human terms. Jesus saw something and something that was usable, and that's all he cared about. Nathaniel's heart, Nathaniel's confession. So Jesus says, "Verily I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." And I have here the last thing on there, greater things to follow. And John 6, 5-6, why do I have that? Did you remember we looked at that, was it last week? Nathaniel was there, but Philip had a part in that lesson from John 6. That was the feeding of the 5,000. And it was Philip that says, it's not, and he came up with a solution. If we had 200 days worth of money, we could barely feed them a little. But when Jesus says here, hereafter ye shall see heaven open, angels ascending, descending upon them. You are going to see so much more than you can even imagine. Okay? Come and see what it says. And then like he said to the nobleman's son, you just came to see a miracle. You're going to see so many miracles, you're going to be overwhelmed with evidence. I'm going to provide you with more than you need to convince you that I'm the Messiah and that I am God himself. So all that from 5 verses on Nathaniel. Bartholomew. Heavenly Father, thank you again for guiding us through your word, and we ask your direction in the morning service, that you would show us and convict our hearts and help us to focus on you throughout the day. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.